This content is about cognitive schemas and bias, according to Beck, whose name you might be familiar with because he developed the Beck Depression Inventory, which is the largest or most common scale used to measure depression in therapeutic settings. So we talk about schemas and scripts, and let's go into what these mean. So schemas, reading the definition, it says it's the organ or information or knowledge we possess about a concept, its attributes, and its relationship to other concepts. And so you can see that it's an organizational structure. And the way we'll talk about it here, it's the organizational structure for the way that you interpret information in your environment and organize it and define it. So here's a basic idea of a schema from cognitive psychology in general. So we all have an idea when we say the word park, and one person may think of a park because they've mostly associated with sports. They might think of it as sports fields and mowed lawns and hot dog vendors and swings. And another person whose idea of a park is maybe by a national park may have a different schema involving hiking trails, expansive nature, and remoteness. And of course, the more experiences each of these individuals gets, the more they will broaden and create distinctions in their schemas. And this happens from childhood on. And so that's a general example. But we also do have examples in our, the way we interpret the world around us that is reflected in our personalities. And so then scripts are like schemas, except they're really detailed descriptions of a series of events instead of just sort of a situation or of a noun. So it's sort of like if you were watching a play, what would you expect in the scene that's about to come up? So it would include things like the timeline, like how long things take to happen, what words you would expect people to say, and what responses they might give you or you might give them, how close you would stand to another person, all those things like that. They dictate what you're going to predict will take place. They're like scripts in particular situations. And here's a general example again. What happens? What script do you have for pulling up to a drive-through? And probably it's something like, you wait for the car ahead, you call your order into a microphone, you pull forward, you pay for your food, you pull forward, you receive the food, you drive on while eating. That's like a script. So it's a series of events instead of just a place or a person or a thing. So we can also think about schemas and scripts in personality. So in personality, a schema is an organizational belief about we or others or situations are like that proactively shape our responses. So here are the schemas, some about the self. I am no good at blank. I am shy. I'm unpopular. I deserve admiration. I have to be perfect. I can't blank. I'm the best. Those are just ideas or schemas, organizational structures about yourself. And we also have schemas about others, like people can't be trusted. People won't like me once they get to know me. People other than me are incompetent. And once again, these can shape how you act toward others, which can in turn become habits, which can be who you become. And we also have scripts that can shape personality, and these are just predictions for social interactions based on past lived or observed experiences, like predicting that math class will be hard and boring. You can think about how that might shape your reactions and shape who you are, or predicting that if you're honest with a loved one, they will reject you. Once again, shaping how things play out for you and therefore who you become. So some schemas can alter self-efficacy. So if you had the schema, everybody should like me, which is a really common one, especially for teens. And then think of what happens when you have this belief that everyone should like you. A friend joins your social group, and it's apparent that this person has taken a dislike to you for whatever reason. This just happens. Not everyone likes everyone. But because you have this schema that everyone should like you, You feel distressed, you lose sleep, you try to change yourself so that the person likes you. It doesn't work. And you lose your social confidence. You lose your self-efficacy that you have or can develop what it takes to navigate complex social situations. Another example of a harmful schema: people can't be trusted. And you can imagine this scenario that if this is your schema and a new love enters your life, you might constantly doubt their good intentions. You might keep your innermost self private. Maybe you'll hide your valuables when they visit. You don't trust people. Maybe you'll be stingy. You won't offer to pay because you'll tend to believe that they're going to try to take advantage of you, and you're going to lose the love. And after repetition after repetition, you might come to have the belief that you don't even have what it takes to be loved. And so now you can see how this schema, people can't be trusted, alters your self-efficacy. Do you have what it takes to be loved? So here are some examples of harmful scripts. You're about to make a speech, and you have a prediction for what's going to happen. You expect it because you have had it happen before. And so a harmful script is something like this for us making a speech. You enter the room and immediately you start sweating. You hear your name called and your heart begins itching. Your first words come out in a strange and stilted way. You cough. You forget what you're going to say and you pause for what seems to be an endless time. You stand there looking down while tears come to your eyes. You hear the teacher ask if you want to go later. You exit the stage and stay home sick for 2 days while getting over your embarrassment. So you can see that this is a script for an adolescent person, very likely, who has that heightened self-consciousness. But hopefully this person experiencing this will learn that it doesn't need to be that way, that he or she has some choices. But if not, then this can be a long-term impact on the self-efficacy, on whether or not this person believes they have the skills that are needed to be competent in a variety of situations. And so this is like a prediction that this person has that becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. So we next asked if we can change our schemas and scripts. So here are some examples of altering the script. So now imagine that your friend tells you about her stage fright that's plagued her for years, but she describes that she got over it when she gave a speech about the plight of a missing woman. And she was really passionate about this work, and she knew this woman. When she thought about all these women that she cared about so deeply, she didn't care about the audience anymore because the topic was more important, and she gave a really good speech that really impacted people. Now, you can learn from it. If you decide to make a speech about a topic that you feel really passionate about, that self-consciousness, that script that you have for how you feel in public speaking, that might not yield anymore because now you have learned vicariously from your friend that you can have a new schema based on passion for the topic. That making a general speech might be problematic, but if it's something you feel really strongly about, you can do it. And that might be a way to change at least this example of a script, which is a type of schema. So we can change our efficacy expectations then. First off, by performance accomplishments, by our past successes or failures. And so if we can give ourselves successful experiences, we can change our efficacy expectations. One thing we can do is what's called performance desensitization. We can pair an aversive behavior with a stimulus. We desensitize ourselves to something that we don't wish to do by pairing it with something we do want to do. And so then we won't worry about that thing we don't want to do so much, sort of like pairing the speech with this passion-filled topic. And then we can have more exposure to performance where we are successful, and we can instruct ourselves on how to go over this and change the way things are. Secondly, as in the previous example, we can watch others overcome their barriers and learn from them. So live modeling, like we just watch someone do that, but also symbolic modeling, stories from others or even stories that we read or see on a video can help us vicariously to change our efficacy expectations. Then we can receive verbal persuasion, encouragement from others. We can, hear suggestions from others or appeals like exhortations, self-instruction. And it's not exactly the same as saying, I know you can do it, I'm confident in you, which can be okay. But even better, get that person to think of their own successes. That's going to be much more effective, because it'll give them a little empowerment. And so you might say, think of that time when you, whatever it was, so well, when you overcame whatever the hurdle was. That's you. That wasn't anyone else, that was you. And remind them of that success. And then emotional arousal is how we feel about it. And so we can use things like relaxation, biofeedback, systematic desensitization, mentioned above, and exposure. So if we can just manage our emotions when our heart starts racing on that stage, can we reframe it as excitement or passion about the topic? Or can we use deliberate relaxation efforts, such as making the exhale twice as long as the inhale to activate parasympathetic nervous system? Or even doing things like a soft gaze, or looking off into the distance, or just closing your eyes and feeling the sun on your skin, something like that. Some of these other things, biofeedback, is where you would actually have some sort of a physiological indicator that, say, when your heart started beating too fast, or your skin was conducting too much because you were keyed up and aroused, then you would get that feedback right away so that you could manage it in that moment. And there are similar neurofeedback mechanisms giving you feedback on how well you're concentrating, say, based on what's actually happening in your brain. And then we talked above about symbolic desensitization. And then we can also think about exposure. The more you're exposed to something and get through it, the less you're likely to have that anxiety in a subsequent effort. So cognitive distortions are just biased interpretations of events in your environment. And it usually comes from a tendency to view experience, to view the world around you and the situations that you're in through a dark lens. And also linked to a tendency to interpret neutral information negatively, or see the worst that's possible. It is linked to depression. So people who are depressed tend to get into these habitual negative thought patterns, which reinforce the pathways for depression. So our thoughts, as we've learned in our behaviors channel, our thinking forges pathways in our brains that become potentiated the more we think them. So if we begin to interpret a situation in a negative way, that forms a series of neural connections in our brain, which then becomes our default interpretation modality for other events. And we can change these things through cognitive restructuring. It generally begins with just being aware of these distortions. And in a therapeutic setting, it would involve the therapist. It would involve very likely you describing some experience that bothered you, and the therapist helping you to see the distorted thinking that's underlying your reaction to the experience. And once we become aware of these patterns, we begin to interrupt them. And then we diminish the power of those neural pathways. And so that's cognitive restructuring. That's a part of the cognitive behavioral therapy, CBT. That's one of the most common treatment techniques used today, at least in Western psychology. And so we'll go through some of the most common cognitive distortions, but there are many. So one common one is called filtering, and it means that we magnify the negative and ignore the positive. So imagine that you have an evaluation meeting with your boss at work, and she has all kinds of good things to say about you, 15 good things. And at the end, she suggests one area that you can improve. And you leave the meeting feeling awful, focused on that one area for improvement and ignoring all those positive comments that she made. So you can think of any examples in your own life or someone around you. Another one is black and white thinking. And so this is a tendency to think about yourself and the world in an all or nothing way. Like it's either got to be everything or nothing. And so you can see this person using words like always and never and any I never feel happy. I don't have any friends. I'm always alone. I always feel sad. And a therapist would probably challenge this thinking. You always feel sad. But remember, when you showed me that picture of yourself holding your kitty, were you feeling sad then? Well, no, I wasn't feeling sad then. So then you don't always feel sad. That's the kind of processing that would take place. And an example of this black and white thinking, you imagine that you consider yourself a good writer, and usually you get A's on your writing in school, but now you're trying to write this paper and it's causing you trouble. It's just not flowing. You can't get the words out. You try, and eventually you give up. And instead of just saying, well, I guess this is just going to be a B paper or a C paper, you stop going to class, you accept an F on your transcript. If I can't get an A, then I'll take an F. And I know someone very well who has this habit. Overgeneralization is another example. This is taking one isolated incident and drawing a really big negative conclusion. So let's imagine that you finally speak up in class, you work up to it for a long time, it took a lot, and then when you say something, it turns out it was sort of silly, and the professor just says, and goes on to the next person. And so then you're going to take that one negative event and draw these big conclusions. I'm always saying stupid things when I speak up. Everyone thinks I'm a fool. Some of these overlap. There are so many of these distortions. Another one is mind reading. So this is inferring another person's motivation without evidence. And I always think this image is here because I think of non-response as being a really nice opportunity for people who have these tendencies to do some mind reading when you don't get a response. And very often that mind reading is worst case scenario. Still no response. She hates me, I know it. And so now this person has read the mind of the person who didn't respond and inferred that they were motivated by this dislike. Whereas, in fact, maybe they just don't like to carry their cell phone around that much. Another example is you ask your partner whether he would mind taking the dog for a walk that evening because you have a lot of work. And just for a moment he hesitates before he's about to say yes, but before he can even speak, you say, oh, I can see you don't want to do it. It's okay, I'll find time. So he's not even been given a chance. You've inferred his motivation. Instead of thinking, oh, he was probably just thinking about an appointment he has or something, something like that, you draw the conclusion that his motivation is to not want to do it, and now you probably have a little tension. Catastrophizing is the tendency to jump to the worst possible conclusion in every scenario, no matter how unlikely it is. And you can see this, the illogical leap from A to B, which is, man, I got a C on my exam, to point B. Oh my God, the world is over. And how did they get there? This person said, I could use my scholarship. That means I'd have to take out more student loans. That means I won't be able to buy a house. I'll never be able to get married. I won't have children. You can see how these illogical leaps brought this person to the catastrophe that is the world ending. Another example, here I am late for work again. This is the second time this year. This time I'll be fired. I know it. What am I going to do when I won't have a job? I won't be able to pay rent. I'll have to move back home. My parents don't want me back home. I'll be homeless. My car will be repossessed. I give up. I might as well just give up and quit right now. So another catastrophe, all in the head of this person. So blaming or personalizing, kind of two sides of the same coin. Blaming is holding others responsible for your pain. Look what you made me do. And we might say that if another person's actions are hurting our feelings, to blame them is inaccurate. We are responsible for our feelings, and we can choose how to respond to another person. And so to blame them for causing you feelings, we can tell them that their actions cause us to have feelings, but that is not their fault. That's something in us that causes us to react in that way. So blaming is considered a cognitive distortion. And likewise, personalizing, assuming that everything revolves around you, or that you are the cause of every problem. So taking responsibility for things that are not your fault, like this woman seeing her husband drinking too much, saying, I know he drinks because of me. If I was a better partner, he would not drink. I'm just such a crappy person, I'd drive anyone to drink. And so she's personalized the situation that may have little to do with her. And another example, this can happen sometimes, is interpreting this ambiguous information negatively. So here's this guy, that he's a stranger in the street. He walks by her, she looks at him, he glowers at her like this. And so personalization, again, is believing that others' words or actions are in some way related to you. And so she sees him in this frame of mind, and this is how his eyes flick over her with this expression on his face, and she thinks to herself, oh no, why is this stranger glowering at me? I must be projecting something awful. He must see that this is how awful I am. This is why he's scowling. But you don't know this. Maybe he just lost his pet or his job or had a fight with his wife, or maybe he's just lonely and isolated. His scowl likely has nothing to do with you, and yet you personalized it and allow it to bring you down. So that's this personalizing. Self-comparison puts you on a roller coaster of highs and lows. So comparing yourself with others and deriving confidence or depression from them, like either way, you're reacting. So when you're one up, when you're doing better than others, you're just the bastion of confidence. And then when someone walks in who's a little better than you do that upward comparison, and now your mood plummets. And oh man, those guys are much cooler than me. That's just a little joke. But when we based our self-opinion, our self-esteem, our sense of ourselves on such comparisons, we're going to have a roller coaster of highs and lows that will always threaten to destabilize us. We'll never have our feet planted on solid ground. And the last couple that I'm offering here, there are many more, are shoulds and rightness. Like shoulds, maintaining a list of ironclad rules about how you and other people should act. Oh, I should want to go to this party. Oh, I should, I should get my dog out for a walk twice a day. I should brush my teeth after every meal. People should hold doors for other people. People should say thank you when you do something kind for them. My granddaughter should write me a thank you letter when I send her that blanket. All of these shoulds are just opportunities to make yourself feel bad when the shoulds aren't met. And so if you, like this person, held the door open, a kind person, this other person walked through without saying thank you. Now look how upset this person is. But his being upset is his own fault. And so this tendency then to allow this innocuous action of this unknown person to affect him in this way, that's the kind of problem that emerges from distortions. And likewise, rightness, always trying to prove that your opinions and actions are correct instead of humbly accepting that sometimes you're wrong. And so this is another example of a distortion that can cause you a lot of problems instead of recognizing that you're human and that sometimes you are wrong. And that even if you are right and someone else is wrong, sometimes it's not worth even mentioning it. And so this again can set a trap for yourself. So all of these are like extremes of thinking that get us into trouble. And I will be posting this video of Dr. Burns, who is a colleague of Dr. Beck, and he's going to explain these cognitive habits that are linked to depression very well. I can't play it in this recording, so you'll go into the site and look at this in a separate recording. It's about a 14-minute talk. Cognitive restructuring is a process that's part of cognitive behavioral therapy, or CBT, that involves challenging the cognitive distortions such as those described in the lecture on Beck. And this usually involves a therapeutic process where someone is in, it might work like this. You would tell a therapist about something that's happened with you, an event that maybe bothered you. And then after you hear it, the therapist might challenge you on some of the underlying beliefs that might be distorted and lead to these negative habits. some things that you can ask yourself if you want to do this process without a therapist is you can ask yourself, do I know this thought is accurate, or is it possible I'm wrong? What evidence do I have? How can I trust my assumptions or beliefs to find out if they're accurate? Like, did this person really reject me? Or is there a way to, maybe they were just busy. How could I find out? Can you bounce these thoughts that you're having off a trusted friend? Is it a helpful thought? Even if it's a thought that's true, is it helpful? Is it benefiting you and others? Are there other ways to think about the situation or to think about oneself? Am I blaming myself unnecessarily? Who else contributed to this situation? Maybe you're blaming yourself unnecessarily. Is this really in my control, or something I should just accept because it's out of my hands? Am I overgeneralizing, making assumptions? What would I be saying to a friend in this situation? Can I look for shades of gray if you detect black and white thinking? Am I assuming the worst? Am I holding myself to an unreasonable standard? Are there exceptions to these absolutes, like always and never? Am I making this personal when it really isn't? And so as you ask yourself these questions, or the therapist helps you with this if you are privileged to have a good therapist working with you, then that's the first step to letting go of those harmful distortions, or at least questioning them when they come up. A big step along the way. And so it can be helpful to challenge unwanted negative thoughts. And it's also wise to be in the middle road, not to succumb to patterns of optimism that are equally biased and unrealistic. Generalizing, making consumptions. Here is a quick little quiz that you can read through these examples on your own time and see if you can determine which of these distortions is taking place.